Hey everyone, I'm rather incoherent, and it occurred to me that a lot of people are watching this channel strictly for analytical commentary, and they don't really watch my gameplay videos, and that's fine, that's not a problem at all. But it can create the false perception that I have a lot of problems with the game and very little praise for it. Generally speaking, I'm really enjoying the game when I'm playing it, and I wanted to make a video just about all the things I think Arkham Horror does really, really well, and also about the things that stood out to me from my first playthroughs of each campaign. About my favorite moments throughout the history of me playing this game before I started the channel. This first part of the video is going to be the spoiler-free part where I just talk generally about the game and what I love about it and why I fell in love as early as the core set. A big part of the reason I fell in love as early as the core set is because I love card games. I love looking through the pool of options and trying to figure out what the best thing I can do is. The process of planning out your level 0 deck, of planning out your upgrades, all of that's really fun and engaging to me. I think the card pool in Arkham Horror is a really good spot, and the investigators are all meaningfully distinct, and that really helps me to enjoy the game at an analytical level. Mechanically, Arkham Horror is just a really smooth game. The setup isn't that bad, the maps are intuitive and satisfying. There are lots of little things, and the mechanics tell a story. Things like roaches having an attack value equal to their shroud, and you realize that that represents the harder it is to search a room, the harder it is to find a roach. There are so many little things in the game where the mechanics tell a story that I really, really enjoy. My videos are primarily analytical. Even my gameplay is primarily focused on how to play correctly and how to learn and how to maximize your odds. So I can't overstate just how much it's lost on my videos that I love the flavor of this game. The first time I read H.P. Lovecraft, I was like 14. Excluding the Dream Quest, which I hated when I was younger, I probably read every story by H.P. Lovecraft at least twice, and most of them 3 times. Just at various points in my life, I've just gone back and reread all of his works, because it's really not that much. There's a lot of books, but all of them are quite short. I actually play at a tabletop role-playing game. We play Call of Cthulhu 7th Edition. I've spent 2 years playing through the Mask of Nyarlathotep. I'm currently DMing for the Two-Headed Serpent. I cannot overstate just how much the flavor of this game works for me. And coming back to it, the way the flavor combines with the mechanics to tell interesting stories. Things like you can be in the final scenario of a campaign, at the climax, something crazy is happening, and the stubborn detective, your weakness, has followed you all the way there because he's convinced that you're the cult leader. Things like no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, the thing that follows is still right behind you. All of the little moments the game can tell you through emergent storytelling as the scenarios and your cards interact in strange things. Hell, basically every scenario Wendy is in has the lingering question, why did we bring this little girl? Which is jarring and immersion breaking, but also hilarious if I'm willing to overlook it in that moment. But there are also so many little things that aren't emergent storytelling that are strictly mechanically that I love. These scenarios aren't all that similar, but in all 5 of them, there are specific moments from my campaigns that I remember because things that went horribly wrong and we had to spend a lot of time trying to figure out our way out. Things were going according to plan, and then something happened, and there was this moment of dread followed by this period of analysis and gameplay where we tried to figure out what the problem was and get through it that made the games memorable and interesting. And I think that's the core gameplay pattern of Arkham, that you spend a lot of time building an engaging deck, you come to a scenario, and then something horrible happens that throws a wrench into your plans, and the scenario is made by this moment where you're trying to get around the problem that you weren't able to prepare for adequately. That's it for the spoiler-free portion of this video. I'm not going to be talking anymore without going into details about scenarios and characters played and specific moments. So if you care about the spoilers, now's your time to go. I'm going to go through all of the campaigns in release order and talk about what my favorite moments from each one were. This is all going to be stuff from off the channel, but I do want to briefly talk about my 2 favorite moments from the campaigns I played on the channel, being sort of enlightening as to how I view the game at its best. I love things that are incredibly flavorful, but my favorite moments are always gameplay related, things where there are a lot of enemies and it's a really hard problem. On this channel, and my videos for both Blood on the Altar and The Last King, those videos were non-stop nightmares, beginning to end problems that were very difficult to deal with, and I just felt like I was pinned, and my entire decision making wasn't what do I want to do, but how do I deal with the current problem. And those were my favorite moments in those campaigns. Those are the kind of moments that make Arkham really, really fun for me, is when I never get to have my plan. My plan has been thrown in the garbage, and all I'm doing is dealing with the problem with whatever cards I have in my hand that might be relevant. so much of my memory from the core set is about rules mistakes and things that we were learning in table talk and not actually from the core set itself, except for one moment. As a small amount of background to this, when we played through the tutorial and when we played through the core set the first time, the only character our 4-person group didn't have was Agnes. I picked Skids, and I didn't pick Skids because I thought he was cool. I chose to go last because I had no way to make my decision informed, so I just decided to let everyone else pick what they thought was cool first. And Skids, in my mind, obviously looked way cooler than Agnes, and I had no idea what his stats meant and just how bad he turned out to be, especially with the card pool at that point in time. And I say the card pool at that point in time, I need to hammer this in. We had a Roland on our team, and he wanted to be the main fighter, so I gave him pretty much all of the blue cards. Which means that I was playing Skids as flex fighter and / investigator, with basically no blue cards. So as you can imagine, my deck was terrible and I did nothing. When we got to the Devour below and we started exploring the woods, we found this location where I was able to investigate it using foot instead of the skill that you're supposed to. I was like, yes, finally I can do something. My team told me to go there, that I was the only person to get those clues, and then I used burglary instead of investigating every single turn that I could. I don't remember what I needed the money for. I just remember yelling that I had figured out where the cult keeps all their jewels and they keep them inside trees as I robbed the Arkham woods. And that's the story of Skids and that entire core set. I spent a whole lot of time and a whole lot of actions doing something, but it wasn't helpful. The Dunwich Legacy occupies a sort of similar space for me. It's pretty much my entire table's least favorite campaign. And again, most of my memories about it are about getting rules wrong or table talk, not about things that were actually happening in or even related to the game. Except for one memory. I was playing Safina, and we had just started the Essex County Express, and we had read Agenda 1A, where the last part of the text is, the train cars topple upwards and into the rift in the sky. Everyone on that train car is obviously dead, right? And these locations are called train car. Something I've stopped doing after like the 4th campaign I played is I would always read the italicized text on the fronts of cards to see what sort of flavor text they give. Because in the early scenarios in the tutorial, they make a point to say, hey, the flavor text might give you some ideas. And then there are very clear examples of ways the flavor text informs you as to what to do or what might happen when you go into a room. So in this scenario, when I was like, oh, the train car got ripped into the sky and we're in a train car. And I saw that there were 5 agenda decks, and I miscounted it and thought there were 5 cars. So I came to the conclusion, if we're in this car when the agenda flips, we all die. I didn't know if that meant we got a trauma, or if we were killed, or if we took loads and loads of damage that would probably kill us. But I remember having a really heated argument that like, no, we had to get these clues and leave, you cannot take setup turns. And then we got out. And a few turns later, we were over here. All of these locations were gone. And we had the same argument because someone else at the table had realized there's not enough agendas left in the deck to get rid of all the train cars. The game would end and this train car would still be in play. The next agenda's gotta remove 2 train cars. And they were right. If we hadn't listened to them, I think half our party would have been killed. The Dunwich Legacy had a lot of really, really cool moments in it, but almost all of them are going to be the same as this favorite moment from Dim Carcosa. It's the story of how Mark killed everyone. I was playing Jenny. As you can see, when I first started the game, I played a lot of rogues. I was convinced that Skids was bad because I played him badly, and I could figure it out, and the answer was no, the card pool for rogues really isn't here at the moment, and also the first rogues really don't actually have a lot going for them. But regardless, at this point in time, I was still trying to figure out how to make Jenny work. And my deck was off-the-wall nonsense. I tried to play like a teamwork Charles Ross Esquire deck with my flex cards where I paid for everyone else's everything. And yeah, that was bad. It turns out if your teammates need help paying for their decks, they should build their decks better, and my teammates didn't need help because they had built their decks better. So I bought 2 adaptables and started pivoting hard out of that, but the one thing I kept from my support setup was contraband. In fact, I upgraded my contrabands, and I would pivot out into a Pete Sylvester Key of E setup so that I'd have a good stat line and be able to flex and do anything. But by the time I got to Dim Carcosa, I realized that I was just here to play contraband onto Mark Harrigan. At some point during the scenario, Mark Harrigan shows up to the Palace of the King, starts beating Haster to death, summons the Beast of Aldebaran, and he's like, yeah, that's not a problem at all. And the reason it's not a problem is because his board looks like this. I don't remember exactly how he got to his bullet count, but I remember playing Contraband twice on a 4 ammo shotgun. He probably fired it once and played an extra ammo, and bringing him up to 16 bullets. So at this point in the game, he's got infinite shotgun bullets, basically. He's attacking twice during the enemy round as well with these survival knives and the bandolier. Me and I think it was Rex were just running around the map getting all the clues, and I was helping to flex fight to keep Rex safe. But Mark just stood in the Palace of the King and killed everyone. That's a very similar story to what happened in Unspeakable Oath, that we got dogpiled by enemies, and the scenario was really more about me playing Contraband on Mark's shotgun and Mark having a shotgun and survival knives than anything anyone else was doing. I think this was the first moment in a campaign where we had like a dedicated fighter that actually got to shine as a dedicated fighter, where instead of feeling like a bodyguard some of the time, they felt like if they weren't there, if they were a flex character, we'd have just been overrun and killed. And moments like this really are the reason that you want a dedicated fighter. When you get swamped by enemies and you just need somebody who can stand there and go toe-to-toe with them and kill them all. Forgotten Age was a really weird one for me to try to rank. And a big part of that is because we all burnt out really hard, really quickly on the explore mechanic. Since we had had such high degrees of success in the previous campaigns, we basically viewed the explore mechanic as causing every scenario to play the same. Explore locations, go to all of them, get all the clues because you need them for victory or things you have to remember, finish the scenario. Every single one felt like we were just spamming out locations and going to all of them. And we really burnt out because it all felt very samey to us and we were all on tilt and burning out just from playing a lot of Arkham back to back. So our memories of this aren't like super fair to the game. The one that stands out to me though is a scenario we actually really struggled with was the first one. We got absolutely railed in the Untamed Wilds. I don't remember where my teammates were exactly. We'd gotten to the end of the scenario, we'd unveiled the ruins of Edsley, and I was alone finishing off Serpent's Haven. I want to say that what had happened is our fighter was in Circuitous Trail finishing off enemies from the last round, and our Kluver and Flex were in the ruins, and they had both spawned enemies that our fighter wasn't able to deal with because he just rolled terribly over and over again against these enemies. There was like one doom left on the agenda. Our Kluvers couldn't actually get clues because they would get killed by the enemies they pulled. And we were just going to lose. Not only were we going to miss victory, there's like 4 victory that we hadn't even pulled out of the exploration deck yet, but we weren't even going to finish the scenario. And up until this point in the scenario, Winifred really hadn't done anything. She'd been a really subpar flex character. And I tell them that I'll go first because I might be able to help them. And they want me to get this victory. They're committed to getting this victory point and then trying to do this. And I agree with them because we'll do crazy things for victory, as you'll see in later scenarios. And I played Daredevil, which found quick thinking, and then pulled the Elder Sign, which for Winnie meant that I was able to, with my lockpicks, pull both of them back to hand. And then with her ability, draw double or nothing. So I was able to get this clue, come over here, use my Mauser to kill an enemy, double or nothing with the quick thinking, to get a high enough value that I get 2 more actions, I deal with all the enemies. It was a ridiculous fucking moment where Winifred actually shined. And it's the reason that I still like Winifred despite not wanting to play her. She's incredibly stressful because you're always having that turn. You're always playing Daredevil into quick thinking. You're always doing something. You've got multiple high impact cards submitted. And if you auto-fail, it's terrible. And if you hit star, it's insane. And she's so high variance. But when that variance is good for you, she feels like legitimately one of the best characters in the game. When you're taking a 6-action turn, and you turn a doom situation into a situation where you single-handedly grab your team and pull them to the victory line, where you kill multiple enemies and get a clue in the same turn as a flex character, feels really, really strong. And it stands out as a moment where this character just like literally saved the scenario. Now, there are 2 moments that stand out to me from the Circle Undone as being the most satisfying things in the campaign. The first is the interaction between Sledgehammer and the Spectral Watcher. It turns out if you have an enemy where it gets up every other round after you kill it and it has 5 health, and you can just consistently kill it unless you hit auto-fail with the Sledgehammer's triple action, that the Spectral Watcher goes from like being an ancient one that really doesn't deserve its tag to being this complete joke where Calvin's just standing on top of it, breaking its knees every time it gets up. The amount that Calvin with Sledgehammer as our flex character trivialized the Spectral Watcher was absolutely hilarious. As opposed to feeling like we were being hunted, we were just like, how many times do you have to teach you this lesson, old man? It was just a really silly thing that completely trivialized a core part of the campaign. But the location, or the event rather, that I remember the most is we had a turn that ended something like this. Diana towards the bottom of the map, me towards the middle. The previous turn, a mindless dancer had moved towards Calvin, and this turn he'd been fighting a mindless dancer. He finishes off the mindless dancer during this turn, and the plan is this one will come over and hit him, and he'll be at max damage, and he'll kill that one with the Sledgehammer's triple action, just like the last one. Speaking of, presuming you don't auto-fail, which Nightmare Bobble is going to guarantee you don't, Sledgehammer's real good versus the mindless dancers. But as you can see, there's one slight problem in this planning phase. We already drew 2 demonic pipings, which means there's a small chance that we spawn another big enemy, and oh, look at that, it's first card for Calvin, here's your Piper of Azeroth and a mindless dancer. So Calvin went from, I will guaranteed kill the mindless dancer, to, oh god, I have no way of dealing with this Piper of Azeroth, and it will kill me over the course of the next couple of turns as it eats through my wards of protection. Or not my wards of protection, my talismans of protection. And for a moment, he and Diana are both panicking. Diana's our primary fighter, still kind of flexy, and I'm our primary clover, obviously, as Harvey Walters. And for a brief moment, they're discussing like how they can possibly deal with this. And then I just ask them, I want to show you my board real quick. I had some other assets on my board, but it was nothing related to fighting. I had absolutely nothing on my board that indicated I was in a situation where I could fight easily. They had like a 2-card deck left. And then I asked them, while they're discussing what Calvin can do to deal with this, should he just evade both of them and leave and try to get them off the map by finding the next location, which we know is going to be up here. But I pipe in, Calvin, do you want me to leave one of them alive for you? Because I'm just able to kill both of these crazy threatening enemies. Because my hand is Ancient Stone's Occult Lexicon. I can Pathfinder into his location, that's not even an action. I can play Ancient Stone Occult Lexicon. I have more money than God because this deck was all economy and draw, so it would just hit the cards it needed over and over again. Which puts the Blood Rights into play and into my deck. And again, it's like a 4-card deck. I'm guaranteed to draw another Blood Right and then another Blood Right. So I've spent 2 actions now, and I can use the Farsights to play a Blood Right each, and then my last action to play another Blood Right. This Ancient Stones had 7 charges. I was able to afford all 3 Blood Rights for 9. That's total 16 damage, and these guys combined only have 12. It wasn't even everything I could do to kill them both, and if I only needed to kill one of them, I would actually only even need 1 Blood Right to do it, and I'd still have an action left and a Farsight unused. Because the first Blood Right draws 3, because I'm Harvey, and I used 4 charges of Ancient Stones to kill this Piper of Azeroth in a single fast action with Farsight. Which is what we ended up settling on doing. Calvin still wanted to beat the mindless dancer to death with his sledgehammer and thought my time was more valuable, which was definitely right. But it was just such a fucking power trip moment, and it was the moment we went from, like, joking that Seekers were overpowered to being like, hey guys, I'm sorry for bringing this to the table, I'll never do this again, this isn't fun. I'm sorry. Because, like, honestly, the things you do with this combination of cards is just disgusting. And while I don't enjoy playing it often, it's nice to power trip once in a while. The Dream Eaters is going to be something I talk about a little differently. As you can see, I haven't set up the memory for you, because the memory is the whole campaign. Dream Eaters, by a landslide, was our favorite campaign on our first playthrough. It will probably stay our favorite campaign on subsequent playthroughs, that remains to be seen. But the Dream Eaters was so incredibly good that it's hard to point to a specific high point. All of it was amazing. I guess my high point would be when we started yelling the phrase rotating spider god during Weaver of the Cosmos. But yeah, there's really not much that stands out to me as bad in this campaign, and most of it is high points. So what I'm going to talk about instead of the high point is the ongoing narrative between our teams. Our team for the Dream side was Norman Withers, Zoe Samaras, and Luke Robinson, and this is astronomical Atlas Norman Withers, not old Norman Withers with a little bit of jank. If you've seen my tier list videos, you know that I rank these cards quite highly, and generally my table agrees with me. They are a little bit less hot on Luke and Zoe than I am, they're still very hot on Norman, but they agree that these are 3 quite powerful characters. Calvin, however, is a character that you've seen multiple times in this video, you've probably heard me talk about him multiple times. He's not as good as we play him. We really like Calvin, but he's obviously not incredible. This Tommy deck was a gimmick deck designed to use Drawing Thins and Rabbit's Feet to rapidly assemble a combo, and I'll get into that later. And this Ashcan Pete deck was really, really strong. I built it with Forced Learning, and I tried to make him a main cleaver by stacking a bunch of book boosts with Charisma and Yellow allies, and then I would use Forced Learning to draw 2 cards and discard my events that were like Glimmer of Hope, Fortuitous Discovery, and Winging It that wanted to be discarded anyway. Now that said, even though I had a clear game plan going into Ashcan Pete, I was the only person that thought Ashcan Pete was good going into the scenario. Our Calvin player had frequently said that even though they really enjoyed playing red characters, they didn't see why anyone would ever play Ashcan. And a big part of that is that when he read Duke, he missed the part where it says that you get a free move action when you investigate, which is a huge part of Ashcan's power. But even with that knowledge, after the first scenario, Calvin and Tommy were both like, yeah, Ashcan doesn't seem that good. And a big reason they came away with that impression isn't just because my Ashcan deck really desperately wanted 2 copies of Charisma. It's because Ashcan rolled Rotting Remains twice, auto-failed both of them, and killed Duke by like turn 5. Like sometimes you just don't draw any of your soak and you take 6 guaranteed horror damage that you can't do anything about and you just lose Duke, and that's a bit rough. Still though, we managed to hobble our way to victory with all of the victory points because both of these characters can flex find clues kind of decently. Scenario 1 also went really well on Dream side. All of these characters performed their roles really well, and by the end of the first 2 scenarios, once we had done scenario 1 on both sides, we'd started referring to them as the Dream Team and the B Team, because that was clearly what they were. And my favorite part of the Dream Eaters is the evolving narrative between these 2 teams over the course of the campaign. To cover the Dream Team over the course of the rest of the campaign, every scenario, things just went mysteriously wrong. The thing that went wrong the worst might be that our Zoe player decided not to run any ally assets because they were tired of all the blue characters running the same set of allies, and they wanted to do something different. By the end of the campaign, they intensely regretted that decision. It turns out cards like Beat Cop and Brother Xavier and Guard Dog are all very good and they're staples for a reason. That said, it wasn't the biggest deal that Zoe wasn't as reliable as she should have been, because both Luke and Norman were running Storm Spirits 3, so we could deal with all the swarm enemies. But despite the hard counterattack to the campaign we were playing in, everything just kept going wrong. Every scenario felt way harder than it should have been. We generally did pretty well, but we felt like we were struggling desperately to do it on characters that were failing for no reason. A big example being a scenario where Norman Withers auto-failed both of his deductions off of the Astronomical Atlas and just failed to set up. Nothing in the Dream Team's campaign really went right. Everything was unnecessarily hard for mysterious reasons that shouldn't have happened. And by the end of it, the joke had become that the Dream Team was actually a nightmare, and that anything that could go wrong would. Meanwhile, on the Waking side, we've really set ourselves up to fail. The player doing the combo Tommy deck was trying really hard to set up a combo that I don't know what it was. I honest to God don't remember. He had playtested it many times just to make sure it was reliable, because I had pointed out that it seemed like it would brick, that his combo wasn't consistent. If you didn't draw drawing, then it would be bad. He was like, nah, man, I've playtested it in 3 different scenarios now. Every time I got online by like turn 3, it's going to be great. And the combo, whatever it is, it's basically just you're a good fighter now. He's a character that's able to very quickly get out and recur agency backup and have infinite ammo on Becky and Enchant Weapon. I think there's more to it than that, but I don't remember it. The reason I don't remember it is because it literally never happened. He breaks 4 scenarios in a row and never once gets what he wants to happen. Our Calvin deck has setup time, but eventually he will be set up. However, that does mean that since Tommy never comes online and Calvin usually takes a while doing it, I, as Ashcan Pete, don't have a fighter to protect me. So almost every scenario, what would happen is Tommy would do nothing for a very long time. Calvin would struggle really hard to come online and try to carry Tommy's dead weight. And as Ashcan, since Calvin needed to keep Tommy alive and there was no one to protect me, would just wander off on my own and just be completely separated as the main clover. Because I did have Duke and I did have Ice Pick, so I was able to protect myself. So the B team really was set up for failure. The most extreme example of the team really functioning as nothing resembling a cohesive whole was in... is it Point of No Return? Is that Ghoul Gang? Yeah, that's Ghoul Gang. In Ghoul Gang, you can go up, you can go down once you unlock that in the Act deck. Our Tommy stayed here or here in one of these 2 places and just fought with enemies to intentionally kill multiple Tetsuo Moris, desperately trying to find the cards he needed. Our Calvin was like, all right, that's cool, and he left to go explore the Tower of Koth. And I just wandered off. I was like 4 locations away down here on my own while this shit was happening, fighting Doles with Ice Picks and Duke. It was just complete nonsense. The team never functioned like a team in any capacity. But in spite of that, in spite of this absolute nightmare that I'm describing, though, the team never struggled. Tommy never did anything. Calvin was always pulling double duty, and Ashcan Pete was always terrified he was going to die if he got an enemy and auto-failed the attack roll. But just like this team always performed poorly, the B team never got that unlucky, except for Tommy's draw order, I guess. And I want to be clear that I'm not exaggerating how unlucky Tommy was. I thought I was exaggerating how bad Tommy's luck was, so I asked my table if they remembered any other moments. And this is the player playing Tommy talking about him. Apparently, at one point in time, he did come online and he killed a whole lot of ghouls in the graveyard in Thousand Shades of Horror. But except for that, he did, quote, the player playing him, bricked absolutely everything possible, effectively doing nothing. But somehow, this team never struggled. A player that couldn't get set up, a player that took a while to get set up, and a player that by all means shouldn't have been truly independent, somehow just managed to all stay alive and get through every scenario relatively consistently. The closest anyone ever came to dying was that first scenario where Ashcan Pete spent the entire game walking around with one horror left because of auto-failing both copies of Rotting Remains. But I mean, there's no Rotting Remains left, you've already auto-failed them all, so you're safe. It was just a really weird evolving narrative, where the standout thing is that over the course of the whole campaign, the Dream Team was realized to be a nightmare, and the B Team actually just did bizarrely well. If I had to put it to a specific thing, though, it would be the Tommy deck. It would be being repeatedly assured that this deck was consistent, followed by damning evidence that whatever it was supposed to do, it didn't do it. The most memorable moment in Innsmouth for me has to have been the end of Lair of Dagon. What you're supposed to do is go take some skill tests and try to get Dagon to stay asleep while you put clues on him and get the clues on this location for victory. But instead what happened is our Trish pulled absolutely miserable tokens, like multiple consecutive -4s and auto-fails. So instead, first turn she woke up Dagon, or maybe second turn, something like that. Our fighter, Silas, this whole time is busy running around constantly. There's no shortage of Doom enemies that are constantly spawning that he needs to go deal with, otherwise we will lose to the final agenda. And at this point, our Trish is done. She's left the room because she will die if Dagon hits her twice, and she has Sharon's Opal. The scenario is basically unwinnable. We can't kill Dagon very quickly, we can't get the clues on this location for the victory, there's no way we're going to be finishing the act before the agenda, and Trish says that we should resign. To which I responded something along the lines of, you can, but I'd appreciate it if you stuck around and pulled tokens from the bag to get the curse tokens out, because I'm going to go kill Dagon. That sounds like nonsense, because I'd be trying to solo 3-person Dagon. How is that ever going to work? So let's break it down. These are the important cards I had. I have Awakened Mantle, both copies of True Magic with Shriveling 5 in hand, and a full charge Xana with 3 Deny Existence 5s on it. I had some allies in play and probably more health in this because the soak will be relevant over the course of this example, but every single turn what I would do is I would move in, use both charges of Shriveling, and then fast move out with the Awakened Mantle. And every turn when I do this, I would test Fist 1 and fail, and he would hit me immediately. And I would use a charge off Diana to, say, heal the physical damage and take the horror. And then the next time he hits me, I'd use the charge again on the next turn. This time, I would heal the horror and take the damage. And eventually, over the course of multiple turns, I start really taking damage. I start losing Diana. I lose my other ally, Alyssa. Everything is dead by the end of this, and I'm only dealing 6 damage a turn. But over the course of the next 4 turns, I single-handedly kill Dagon. This is terrible, because by the end of it, Trish and Silas had both resigned, because on the last turn, the Doom ticks over to 6, and I die and take my trauma. But for some reason, I just really, really wanted to kill Dagon. I don't know why. The other most memorable moment for me would have definitely been in Horror on High Gear. In Horror on High Gear, at some point in time, we had the car with Trish and Silas up here, me right here, and the enemies behind us. And there is a token in this bag. Squid, it gives -4, and if you fail, resolve the Hunter keyword on each enemy in play. I believe twice during the scenario, Trish would be in the car ahead of me, go first, pull the squid, and pull all the 100 enemies to me. The first time I was able to handle it. The second time, it pulled like 4 cards, and we had just committed to never having the enemies catch us because I was Gloria, and I'd actually put down 2 of they're gaining on us under me, and my basement had already flipped, so we were just guaranteed to stay ahead of them. Unless Trish goes first and pulls the enemies while I'm a car behind them. Trish repeatedly almost killing me in Horror on High Gear is definitely the second most memorable part of this campaign for me, and a lot sillier than me just randomly and wrongly choosing to go toe-to-toe with Dagon for 4 straight turns. But a lot like the Mark moment in Dim Carcosa, it's not strictly about whether or not it was a good play, it's about the fact that it felt really cool and important at the time. And looking back on it, it's like, man, we could have done a million other things, but we just chose to kill an old one, didn't we? Anyway, that's it for now. I just wanted to have a video where I talked about why I loved Arkham Horror and gave some memorable moments and campaigns that really stood out to me and are the reason I remember those campaigns so fondly in some ways, but also just really cool moments in Arkham that I wanted to put down here before I forgot about them forever. Anyway, I've been Rather Coherent. I hope you liked this sort of weird video, and I'll see you in the next one.